Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Easy Conversations, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I sit down with an old friend of mine, Michael Davis. Mike and I talk about his struggles with lack of confidence and people pleasing, especially because of how Mike had to experience his parents separating at a very early age. Mike talks about some of the things he's done to work through the issues with confidence and people pleasing. He also touches on his experience in the military and how that helped him kind of build that resiliency and a sense of community. I hope you can get as much as I did from this episode. If at the end you could leave a review, I would truly appreciate it. We'll just jump right into it. So I want to take the opportunity here to introduce a really old friend of mine, not old age-wise, but we go way back. Michael Davis. So he's a fellow engineer, and he's been fortunate enough to work in various cities in Canada. So kind of started in Montreal, moved across the country to Edmonton, and now back in Toronto. Mike also had the opportunity to be in the military, and now he's with his living with his lovely wife and 4-year-old daughter. And I'm so grateful that Mike's joined the podcast today and taken the time to come and have a conversation with me. So welcome to the podcast, Michael. Again, super appreciative of the fact that you wanted to do this and take the time. And I'm hoping we'll have a great conversation today.
I'm really looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Furkan, and uh, I'm. This is my first kind of podcast experience, so I'm glad we're breaking the ice together. And I'm really looking forward to having a good conversation with you.
Yeah,
Well, hopefully you'll be pretty easy on me.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I also want to, appreciate the fact that you've been really supportive. You've been listening to the my other episodes and provided feedback. So, I truly appreciate that. I appreciate the support. And yeah, I'm super excited that you're here as well. To really touch on today was starting from childhood. And you know, so for me, it is a bit relatable because my son is going through, I think, something similar to what you went through as a child, and that's kind of having parents that have split up at a young age. Yeah, do you want to touch on that? Because I know for my son, the reason why it's relatable, he kind of started experiencing that at the age of 4, and not being able to express his emotions or how he feels about it. It's definitely impacted him. I see it, whether it's through his ability to express himself or just in his ability to be confident about and adopting his identity, because he's got a different identity around mom and a different identity around dad. So definitely see that as an impact. But I want to get kind of your story out of it too.
Yeah, that's quite interesting because once you put it into perspective, the ages, that's right. Um, we're I don't want to say we're carbon copies, but we're pretty close. So for myself, my I did grow up. My parents did divorce at a young age. We were three children at the time, and I was I was around the age of 3 when it started,
Hmm.
and it it did have well, it's nothing you can run away from. It's an impact in your life, and it does. I can say it's an impact, but that sticks with you, but it doesn't. It shapes you, but it doesn't define you. So
Hmm.
I'll give that to you. Um, grow Growing up when it happens at such a at that that age, I find it was it was hard to wrap your head around why things are happening. You just at that age, you're just running through the motions. It
Mm-hmm.
does. You're you can't really grasp or comprehend the meaning behind, you know, seeing dad every 2 weeks
Yeah.
and every other weekend, and sticking around at home. Your family your family doesn't seem broken at that age, but
Mm-hmm.
then as I grew up, you definitely started to see, oh, why there was a rift in the relationship, and the emotions that are kind of attached to a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And it does impact you. I can see where you mentioned your son, he acts one way with you, and another way resolved on a personal level, but they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are to tackle it, especially from a family approach, uh, it's it's not something that's gonna. It's not a few
Yeah.
sessions of therapy. It takes time
Yeah.
and dedication from everybody. But we've I know for us as a family, we've addressed we've addressed them, and we talk about them, and those what happens in the past, especially with divorces, they don't go away.
Yeah.
Even as much as you want to talk about them, as much as you have, um, as much as you come to your own resolve over the issue, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's not going to go away. It's important to understand what triggers, I guess, some emotions or some retrieval of that memory, and understanding of yourself, why that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and then also understanding what environment you're in, because you could be at a party and something could
Yeah.
trigger it, or
Absolutely.
having a chat and that could trigger it, and knowing why that triggers it can help you address it in the environment that you're in.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I completely agree. And I think that applies to most triggers is, it could be anything, but recognizing what is the source and why it's happening is obviously part of the healing process. Um, I guess for me to understand, so I've had friends who've gone through similar situations, like yourselves, where the parents separated, and in some cases they hold resentment for their parents because they feel the parents were either being selfish or they kind of dragged the kids in to their own ego battles or fights with each other, and they often put their own selfish needs, and that's quote unquote selfish needs, before the needs of the child. And everyone's experience is different, but just from your perspective, did you ever feel that way, or did you ever have any resentment towards your parents, at or mom and dad at any point, growing up and going through the motions?
I can't say that I had resentment. um, I I was definitely upset, and whenever I had to deal with being upset over something, I always told myself, these feelings that you're feeling right now, you don't want to experience them again. So what would you do in when you're in that situation that would not lead someone else to be hurt this way?
Mhm, mhm.
And so it was it was it, I had a hard time resenting my parents. It didn't pop up into my mind.
Mhm.
I I didn't agree with decisions that they made, but I was always kind of empathetic to the fact that they're going through something. They've decided to do something this way. I don't understand it, but maybe one day I will.
Mhm.
And so uh, that's the way that I've kind of approach it the whole way through. And
Yeah.
now being at this age, at this stage of my life, which is kind of in and around the age range that my parents were
Yeah.
in, and now being a father myself,
Yeah.
you know as well as I, there's books out there, but there's no book for you
Mm-mm.
that can help you really. Well, not help. There's definitely help and resources out there, but when you're going through the emotions of life and the motions of life, there's nothing that prepares you for that situation.
No.
So you can I can't hold resentment. I can't agree with some decisions that were made, but I can't hold resentments
Mm-hmm.
on that fact. The
Yeah.
decision was made. And it was what it was. What transpires after it has to be dealt with as well. But as long as you don't walk away from that, then that's
Yeah.
I would say that's what I would have to say. Yeah, with
Yeah, no,
regards to
that,
that.
I mean, that's good. I mean, the fact that, obviously it appears that you've dealt with it as best as you can, in a very healthy fashion. And you're right. I mean, there's no book out there. We all kind of do the best we know at that in any given moment. And the same applies to our parents. They were doing the best they can, and obviously there's a lot of choices they make that we can, in hindsight, look back and disagree with. But until you're not in the situation, you can't really judge. So I appreciate that perspective that you've presented. But one,
I can add one more thing if I were to relate it back to you. I think from a child's perspective, I was able to be more understanding when my parents were as transparent as they were,
mm-hmm,
and um, that that helped out a lot. It it didn't in some minds it didn't justify to me why decisions were made or how things were going about, but
mm-hmm,
as long as I knew I could respect I could respect the the situation if I was being transparent to it. If I
yeah,
was being if I was if I was having the wolves pulled over my eyes, or a kid can sense that there. Uh, so as long as you're being transparent with them and say, I might not have all the answers right now, and but I'm here,
yeah,
so we can talk about this at any time, and that's more of that can be a therapy session as well.
yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that insight as well. And yeah, being transparent is key, and sharing as much as you can. And I think when you start treating the kids as, as individuals rather than children, then they appreciate that too, where you're kind of having those conversations and not trying to bubble wrap them or protect them from these difficult conversations, because you're going to need to have them later on, and they're going to be even more difficult for sure. I guess one of the things you did touch on was wanting to appease your parents at the, you know, almost sacrificing your needs in order to attend to the needs of, your mom or your dad at any given point. Um, do you feel like that's impacted you even in your adult life? Do you feel like you're often being the peacemaker? Are you, and has that impacted you in the sense where you're like, okay, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I'll just try to please others at the cost of, or compromising yourself.
Yeah, that does come up, and the it's a mixture of anxiety, empathy, and a sense of satisfaction as well. It does come up in my regular day life.
Yeah.
Decisions that have to be made. Uh, I I do have those those voices in the back of your head. I'm not crazy, but your mind does ponder, and
Yeah.
you do think, well, let's think of how, like, when you're in a situation, how is this going to how's the outcome going to come about this, and um, when you are negotiating a situation, you you you, you try and think trying to come to the best terms, but
Hmm.
sometimes it does. I do find that I rather have the best situation for the situation come out, as opposed to the best situation for myself, and
Right.
that's something you struggle with, because when do you put yourself first?
Hmm.
Oh, and when is the right time to put yourself first? And it's definitely important, and that's something that I've learned over the years, and especially you know when my confidence has been high. Sure, you can let the situation appease to everybody, and you can be that peacemaker. But when your confidence hits a low point, uh, it's hard to put your. I find it's hard. It was hard trying to put myself first,
Hmm.
and but it's by putting myself first in those situations that helped me regain my confidence.
Hmm.
And it's yeah, that that definitely definitely comes into play.
For sure. Yeah. And I guess speaking of confidence, so, at a very young age, you weren't making decisions for yourself or choosing yourself. A lot of the decisions were being made for you, and you kind of felt like you had to go along with it because you didn't want to, you know, upset anyone.
Mhm.
Um, so how's that impacted your life in terms of, you talk about having moments of low confidence and moments of where you're feeling a bit more confident, but how, like, what are the measures you've taken to address that? And because ultimately what happens is, you know a lot of the things that happen to us in our childhood, not our fault, and we can sit there and grow up, and as we get into adulthood, learn from them, but at some point it's our responsibility to make those changes and compensate, or make those corrective actions as adults, because we can't sit there and keep blaming our parents, you know um have you had that mindset, and what have you done to make those changes?
Yeah, I remember when I was the day I had to when I came up with the idea of joining the army,
Mhm.
and it wasn't really it was my idea, but I had a really close friend, a good buddy of mine, who was going through a tough time. He was out of school and working, and his parents were really contemplating on. We were 18 at the time, so they were like, "You've got to get on with your life, so you might have to step out of the house." But he wasn't working or anything like that. So I thought about him, and walking home one day, somebody passed me a flyer that asked me to join the military for the summer. And so I talked about it as a friend with my friend, and I was like, that could be a great idea. That could get you some money, and you could stay at home and still figure your life out. And I'll tag along for the ride.
Mhm.
But then when I had that oh moment, I've got to let my family know about this. Um, I ran through every scenario. Like, my mom's my mom's gonna tear a strip off of me, or
Yeah.
she's going to be unconsolable and never be able to reckon with this. But that's when when I actually proposed it. I could see there was hesitation, but then I also saw that there was trust in me, um, that I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm going to have to start making my own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So that ended up being a confidence booster. Same ordeal with when I passed it over with my dad. You know, I could I could sense he was trying to reflect it, but they never put the barrier on me to uh, not to go forward with it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that they did, because it did it helped to instill the values and virtues that I still follow to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And then that I think that kind of breaks down some of the anxiety that I had associated with it,
Mm-hmm.
with my family relationship. Always trying to always try keeping them in mind, but keeping them at the forefront as well in my decision processes. But then I came to a realization that I've got to do this up for myself.
Right.
And that same thing when we had to make that decision to move across the country.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big ordeal. Both my wife and I were from very close knit families,
Mm-hmm.
and for you to be the one to break that tie, that that is that it was it was something bold to do. And but by when I was going through it, it 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 uh, it was definitely self assuring, and boosted my confidence to say that I could do something out on my own.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's a great story because, yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere. But what are you doing now? What are the things you're doing now to kind of, I guess it's more about maintenance and sustaining, right? So how are you maintaining that level of confidence, and what are your plans for sustaining it on a go forward basis?
It's a continual cycle of self reflection, I find. So when you are confident, your blinders are up because things are going really well, and but you have to kind of self remind yourself. I find there's two key things to maintaining your confidence. Is one, knowing who you are. It's such a general statement, but it's so critical. Growing up, everyone asked you, like, what are you going to do with your life? And everyone rolls their eyes on the back of the head, because how can you answer such a question when there's so many unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
One, it's the exercise that you is critical to run through, is understanding who you are. Ask Asking yourself, or researching yourself, to find out what are your great what are your characteristics, and what are your good characteristics. What are characteristics that you not hinder yourself, but that bring upon or trigger some bad habits that can lead to poor decision making,
Mm-hmm.
or lowering your self confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that that's a critical thing. I keep going back to, is I know who I am, but I have to kind of remind myself why I am the way I am,
Mm-hmm.
and by doing so, that builds your confidence up.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're able to identify, like, oh, these are my strong points. I'm really good at this, and I might not be so good at this, but I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a situation does come up that you run through, that you're not successful in it, and you might start to dwell on that, and because you weren't successful at it. Well, that you have to ask yourself, well, what was it about me that made it become not so successful?
Mm-hmm.
Was it my good points, or was it some attributes that I'm not really good at?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a combination of them. But you doing that reflecting and going over it is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm.
That's what gets you out of the dumps,
For sure.
and starts the confidence rebuilding process. It's almost like a game of Jenga.
Yeah.
You know the end outcome is it will topple over a little bit, but when you come back to it, you just have to build it back up. And understanding yourself helps the process, quicken the process.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
so
I
there,
guess your
I was
goal
going to
is
say,
to continue on this process, right? If I were to
correct.
understand correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. And the second part of that is, once you've understood yourself, understanding yourself with others.
Mm-hmm.
That that comes that's the second, that's what I find is the second step. Because if you only just concentrate on yourself, you just build your circle around yourself, and then you kind of your blinders are on high as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not considering, you're not enlightening yourself, or being empathetic, or keying into those um, what's emotional intelligences that are out there. So once you've understood yourself, take yourself and understand how you interact with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because once you understand how well how well of yourself can interact with others, oh man, your confidence just skyrockets over there,
Yeah.
because you start to put yourself with people that will allow you to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the same mindset, but people that will allow you to be successful. And I say that because I don't want to steer people into thinking, well, I got to put myself with people that are just like me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a misdirected strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put yourself with people who, one will encourage you, two will counter you with good critical thinking, and you don't want them to think the same way as you do, because what if they do, then you're always going along the same path, and you're not considering
Yeah.
those other factors that might key into your success as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've nailed that because otherwise you all have the same blind spots, right?
Hmm.
So that's a very good point. I just wanted to quickly touch on your military experience. So, I know you touched on it and what was that like? Did that kind of help with your confidence building, being in that experience? Did you also have mental health challenges come out of that, or just being around people that all had their own struggles? What was that like?
It was a transition from boys to men. That's definitely sure, because you enter into a realm of, of a lot of people with high self confidence,
Hmm.
and also are very uh, leadership orientated. They 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 and a lot of A type, a not not a good portion of A type personalities,
Hmm.
but um, definitely people are very strong willed, and that was great for me, because it pushed me to, I liked being surrounded by that good core of characteristics and people, but it made me step back, because there was a lot of good leaders in the room,
Hmm.
and you could easily identify them, but then you you start to wonder, wow, there's so many great leaders. Can I even meet that level?
Mm-hmm.
Because these guys are top notch. And so I when I think about it now, the answer is yes, because they're probably thinking the same thing. But it makes me go back to what I was talking about earlier. It's that self-reflecting and saying, well, you know what, I'm here. People are listening to me, and
Mm-hmm.
my opinion counts. So yeah, I can lead. And what I did, I think one of the greatest things I did take about from the military is that you get thrown with every different kind of character, and you can easily be labeled as one caste type or another.
Mm-hmm.
And well, case in point, I used to do during the summers. We were sometimes I did some taskings up in Ottawa,
Mm-hmm.
where we would do ceremonial guard. That's the you see it all on the postcards. It's the guys in the big red suits and the tall black bearskin hats doing
Mm-hmm.
the parading across in the middle of the streets and all that. I was a part of that, and when we started our tasking, you know, we're all we're pretty much just divided based off of height,
Mm-hmm.
and but we were at one time we were the group that I was a part of, bunch of riff, like people didn't think too highly of us because we didn't fit that prototypical military mold,
Mm-hmm.
right? And everyone thought that we would not be able to meet the performance and levels of expectations that are set high for that kind of tourist um, touristic or that kind of tasking. But we came together, and the group was just able to understand what our strengths were and work together. And when we started to work together, we surpassed the performance of all the other groups, and we would elevate them to our level.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of the example squad, and people were scratching their heads. They're like, we've got the best guys here in our group, but we're not performing.
Mm-hmm.
And it either came down to leadership and that group not following the leadership, or it came down to a, multiple of different factors. But the fact was that our group was very tight,
Mm-hmm.
and, and we were even though we even inside the group we understood we had our differences. We still came we were able to understand that and come out and perform every day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was some of the best summers I've ever had, because it really understood the art of team building and self improvement. That's something I'm always going to be proud of.
No, that's awesome. And I guess, did you feel like there was support systems in place for you guys if at any point you guys felt like there was struggling, or if you needed any kind of help mentally or emotionally? Did you guys have that support system in place?
the at the lowest level, I'm sure um, there's probably some good organizational structuring in place that and resources that uh, you can reach out to in the military.
Mm-hmm.
The strongest point, the strongest support that you can have is the buddy system. And I think that's you can read every history book on the military and everyone's recount, but when it comes down to it, I think the root of it is that buddy system. and you have to acknowledge that you have to rely on others in order for yourself to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a mental health and mental wellness point of view, yeah, there it was there, because you would have that chat with buddy,
Mm-hmm.
and or you would have that check-in. Someone would come up to you and say, you don't look you don't look yourself today, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
And you some people were open about it and vulnerable, and were able to express it, but some people weren't.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see, I could see that the people who did seek out that help and took it and worked with it were able to come back,
Mm-hmm.
or or um, or come to some form of terms with it, and acknowledge it. And then the others that didn't, they continued to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
It was that buddy check, always looking back and making sure that buddy was there, buddy's by your side. Um, I I was definitely, when I joined up, and I'm to this day I'm still not a great runner, but we would go out on our runs in the morning for physical training, PT. And if um, if one person was lagging behind, the group lagged with it.
Mm-hmm.
There were some leaders who just dragged on the course and kept and let that person drag behind. But the good leaders saw that and caught back up with the struggling runner, like sometimes I was. And
Mm-hmm.
we came to the finish line as a group. And that's where everyone understood. It's sometimes the weakest link needs to be, you're only as strong as the weakest link. But you're if you don't if you ignore the weakest link and just let it fall behind, you're all gonna fall behind. But if
Mm-hmm.
you bring and work up those points, or that person, or that's where, as a group, you really start to build and strengthen yourselves,
No, that's
personally and as a group.
no, that's amazing. And thank you for sharing that story. Um, Mike, I want to, again, sincere appreciation for coming here, sharing your story, being vulnerable, and talking through your journey and all the steps you've taken along the way to shape who you are today. And I'm so happy for seeing everything great happening. Happy family with your 4-year-old. That's amazing. And yeah, I mean, if for listeners, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way, whether it's social media or anything? Yeah, is there anything you can share?
Sure, I can. If you want to reach out to me, I'm on social media. I'm still trying to learn some of it, so I've got a Facebook account. Though there's probably a lot of Michael Davises out there, but I'm also on Instagram. You can find me at McPhee_mustache, or what's the other one? Or Reboot Furnishing. I have two accounts that you can find me at, and reach out to me, or just follow. I'm always an eager, open ear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tag you on Instagram when I post this. But yeah, I just want to again thank you for doing this, and yeah, appreciate you coming on here.
Thank you for. I want to thank you for, again, this. I think this platform that you're building here is something, is really addressing something that needs to be addressed. Mental wellness is finally coming out as something that needs to be addressed, and you're definitely adding value to the cause. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Well, that's the end of the podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And again, please leave a review at the end of the episode. I would truly appreciate it. Until next week.